I just lived my worst nightmare. A Jeep tore through my brick wall. Then the HOA president tried to sue me for it. Her excuse? She said my illegal wall almost injured her daughter. Little did she know the judge would watch the dashcam and shut her down for good. But let me start at the beginning. Before we dive in, let me know where you're listening from today. My name is Hank Gregory. I fix things. A Jeep hit my wall. Then they tried to bill me for it. Engines, pipes, broken promises. If it's busted, I can usually make it right. It's a simple living, but it's an honest one. And up here, in Augusta, Maine, honest still counts for something. Or, at least it used to. My wife Pam, she's the brains of the operation. She runs the business side, keeps the books, and most importantly, keeps me from swinging first when some bully gets in my face. I've got a short fuse for bullies. Always have. It's a character flaw Pam says we can't afford, but it's wired into my bones. We have a good life, a small house, a big yard, and a daughter, Lily, who is the center of our whole universe. That's why I built the wall. It wasn't a spite fence or some fortress. It was a simple 3ft high brick wall that ran along the front of our property. It was for Lily. It gave her a safe place to play, a clear line between our yard and the street. I built it myself, brick by brick. Pulled the permits, got the inspections, did everything by the book. It was solid, straight, and looked damn good, if I do say so myself. It was my handiwork, a testament to doing things the right way. And for 2 years, it did its job perfectly. Until that one Saturday morning, the day started out perfect. One of those crisp Maine mornings where the air is so clean it almost hurts to breathe. The sun was just starting to burn off the morning mist, and the coffee was hot and strong. Pam was at the kitchen table, scrolling through her tablet, probably organizing invoices. Lily was still asleep, her room at the front of the house. Right behind that wall, I was out in the garage, tinkering with a lawnmower engine that wouldn't turn over. The smell of oil and cut grass hung in the air. It was peaceful, quiet, the kind of quiet you work your whole life for. Then came the sound. It wasn't a bang or a crash. It was a roar followed by a sickening crunch that felt like the world was tearing itself in half. It was the sound of metal twisting, bricks exploding, and the earth itself groaning in protest. I dropped the wrench I was holding. It clattered on the concrete floor, but I barely heard it. My heart hammered against my ribs. A frantic drumbeat of pure, undiluted terror. My first thought, my only thought, was Lily, her room, the front of the house. I burst out of the garage, my feet pounding on the driveway. I rounded the corner of the house, my mind screaming. And then I saw it. A silver Jeep Wrangler was buried nose first in my front yard. It had plowed through my brick wall, sending a spray of red dust and shattered fragments across the lawn. The engine was still running, a high-pitched whine of mechanical pain. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was where it stopped. The mangled front bumper of that two-tone steel beast was less than 3 feet from Lily's bedroom window. Lily's window is 6 feet behind that wall. The wall saved her. 3 feet, a little more gas, a little less brick, and my whole world would have ended right there. I felt the blood drain from my face. My legs felt weak. For a second, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I was just frozen, staring at the wreckage, my mind playing out 100 different horrible possibilities. Pam was right behind me, a hand flying to her mouth, her gasp lost in the sudden ringing silence. We stood there for what felt like an eternity, just looking at the sheer random violence of it all. The perfect lawn, torn up, the flower beds Pam had spent weeks on obliterated, and my wall, my beautiful solid wall, was just a pile of rubble. Then the driver's side door of the Jeep creaked open. A young woman, maybe 17, stumbled out. She was pale, shaking, and holding a phone to her ear. She looked at the devastation, her eyes wide with shock. She looked at me, at Pam, and then she did something that snapped me out of my trance. She started crying. Not tears of remorse, tears of frustration. "Mom, it's totaled," she wailed into the phone. "The whole front end is smashed. My car is ruined." Not, "I almost drove through a child's bedroom." Not, "Is everyone okay?" Just, "My car is ruined." That's when the anger started to burn through the fear. It started as a low ember in my gut and quickly flared into a hot white rage. I took a step forward, my hands clenched into fists. Pam put a hand on my arm, her grip like steel. Pam's grip said, "Use your words, not your fists." Mine said, "We'll see." "Not yet, Hank," she whispered, her voice tight. Wait, I didn't know what we were waiting for, but I trusted her. I always trust her. Then I saw what she saw. A figure was marching down the street from the house next door. It was Karen Tillman, our HOA president and self-appointed queen of the neighborhood, and a woman who seemed to find joy only in the misery of others. She was wearing a fluffy pink bathrobe and slippers, her hair in a messy bun, but she wasn't coming to help. She was holding her phone up, the camera lens pointed right at us, and she was live streaming. "You see this?" she screeched, her voice a grating whine that could strip paint. "This is exactly what I was talking about. An illegal WA, a hazard to the community." The girl from the Jeep, her daughter, looked over at her mom, a flicker of something, relief, confusion, on her face. Karen ignored her. Her focus was entirely on the camera, on her performance. This man, Hank Gregory, built this dangerous, unpermitted structure. And now, look, my poor baby could have been killed. I just stared at her, dumbfounded. The sheer breathtaking audacity of it. My wall, which had just stopped her daughter from plowing into my daughter's bedroom, was somehow the villain. I was the bad guy. My blood was boiling. I could feel the words hot and angry rising in my throat, but Pam squeezed my arm harder. Let her, she murmured, her own phone now out recording Karen. Let her dig the hole. And that's what we did. We stood there in the ruins of our Saturday morning with a two-ton reminder of what almost happened sitting in our yard. And we watched Karen Tillman perform for her online audience, blaming me, my wall, and everything but the person who was actually behind the wheel. Now, you have to understand, this wasn't my first rodeo with Karen Tillman. This woman was a professional pain in the neck. She had been the president of our HOA for 5 years, a reign of terror built on petty grievances and an encyclopedic knowledge of bylaws that she seemed to invent on the spot. She was the type of person who would measure your grass with a ruler and then send you a violation notice complete with a passive-aggressive smiley face drawn at the bottom. We'd had our run-ins before. There was the great mailbox incident of 2021, where she claimed my mailbox was half an inch too close to the curb, a violation of a rule she couldn't actually produce when I asked to see it in writing. She hated being wrong. More than that, she hated being proven wrong by a guy like me, a guy who works with his hands, a guy she looked down on from her perch of imagined superiority. The wall, though that was her masterpiece, from the moment I first staked out the property line, she was on me. You can't build that here, Hank, she'd said, standing on her perfectly manicured lawn with her arms crossed. It's against the covenants. I smiled politely. Actually, Karen, it's not. I checked. As long as it's under 4 feet and not a solid privacy fence, it's perfectly fine. Her eyes narrowed. Well, I'll be the judge of that. I'm the president. I just nodded. I'm sure you will be. That's why I already submitted the plans to the HOA board for review. I had, of course. I'd sent them certified mail, so I had the receipt. 2 weeks later, having received no official objection, I was legally cleared to start, but that wasn't good enough for Karen. The day I broke ground, she called the city code enforcement office, said I was doing unpermitted work. The inspector, a tired-looking guy named Dave, showed up. I showed him my permit, and he left, but not before giving Karen a weary look. The day I laid the first course of bricks, she called the police, claiming I was creating a public nuisance with the noise from my cement mixer at the perfectly legal hour of Las 10 LTM. The officer checked, then left. I did everything by the book because I knew with a woman like Karen watching my every move, I had to. The foundation was dug to the proper depth for the main frost line. The rebar was spaced correctly. The mortar mix was perfect. I even had the city inspector Dave come out for a mid-project inspection and a final one when it was done. He signed off on it both times, sticking the little green approval tags on the permit card, which I kept safely filed away. I took pictures of every stage of the construction, not for posterity, but for protection. I knew sooner or later Karen would try something. I just never imagined it would be this. Seeing her there, phone in hand, spinning this wild tale of my illegal death trap wall. It was infuriating, but it wasn't surprising. This was her move. Twist the facts, create a narrative where she's the victim and you're the monster, and then broadcast it to the world. Her daughter Brittany just stood there by the wrecked Jeep, looking sullen. The cops arrived and Karen immediately descended on them. A flurry of dramatic gestures and high-pitched accusations. Police cited Brittany for inattentive driving. It went on the report at 9:47 a.m. that evening. Karen filed a formal complaint, blaming my illegal wall. I watched her point at the rubble, then at my house, then at me. Pam was still filming. Her face was a mask of calm, but I could see the fury in her eyes. Get Lily, she said to me in a low voice. Take her to the back of the house. I'll handle this. I nodded, my own anger giving way to a cold, hard resolve. I went inside. The crash had woken Lily up. She was standing in her doorway, her eyes wide, clutching a stuffed bear. Daddy, what was that loud noise? She asked, her little voice trembling. I scooped her up in my arms and held her tight. Just a silly driver, sweetie, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Everything's okay. My wall kept you safe. I carried her to the back porch, away from the flashing lights and the sound of Karen's voice, as I sat there with Lily's small head resting on my shoulder. I looked at my hands. They were calloused and stained with grease. The hands of a man who builds things, who fixes things. And I made a promise to myself. Karen Tillman had just declared war on my family. She had tried to turn my work, my care, my protection into a weapon against me. She had picked the wrong fight with the wrong guy. I was going to fix this. I was going to take her lies and her arrogance. And I was going to dismantle them piece by piece until there was nothing left but the truth. The cops eventually got our statement, took some pictures, and called a tow truck. Brittany's Jeep was dragged, leaking fluids out of my yard, leaving a trail of destruction behind it. Karen gave me one last triumphant smirk before disappearing back into her house. The silence that followed was heavy. Pam and I just stood there, surveying the damage. She's not going to let this go. You know, Pam said, finally breaking the quiet. I know, I replied, my eyes fixed on the gap where my wall used to be. Neither am I. The battle lines had been drawn right there on our front lawn. We had no idea the first shot was already on its way. A week went by, a tense, unsettling week. We patched up the hole in the wall with some plywood, a temporary scar on our home. Every time I pulled into the driveway, I'd see it, and the anger would churn in my stomach. Karen, for her part, was eerily quiet. Too quiet. We'd see her coming and going, but she'd just give us a smug little smile, like a cat who'd just swallowed a canary. Pam and I spent the week preparing for whatever was coming next. We printed out copies of the building permit, the inspection reports, and the photos I'd taken during construction. Pam downloaded the video from her phone, and the footage from our front door security camera onto a hard drive. We were building an arsenal of truth. That night, my camera box hung open. I wanted to be angry, to go over there and have it out with her, but Pam kept me grounded. No, Hank, she'd say, her voice firm. We don't talk to her. We don't engage. We wait and we document. Let her make the next move. She was right, of course. She always is. When you're dealing with someone who thrives on drama, the best thing you can do is starve them of it. The next move came on a Thursday afternoon. I was in the kitchen trying to get a stubborn grease stain off my hands when I heard the mail slot clank shut. I walked over and picked up the small pile of letters from the floor. Bills, junk mail, and one large crisp manila envelope. It had no return address, just a postmark from a local legal processing company. My stomach tightened. I knew even before I opened it what it was going to be. I slid the envelope open with my thumb and pulled out the thick stack of papers inside. The words at the top of the first page leaped out at me in stark, bold letters. Summons and complaint. I scanned the document, my eyes jumping from one legal term to the next. The plaintiff was Brittany Tillman. The defendant was me, Hank Gregory. And the amount they were suing for made me feel like I'd been punched in the gut. $25,000 for damages, pain, and suffering caused by my negligently constructed and illegally placed hazardous wall. I read it again and then a third time just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. They were suing me. Her daughter, who had smashed through my property and nearly ended up in my child's bedroom, was suing me. The lawsuit was a work of fiction. It claimed my wall was an unpermitted nuisance that blocked the line of sight from their driveway, creating a death trap for anyone pulling out. It alleged that the wall's shoddy construction caused it to explode in a dangerous manner, sending shrapnel that damaged their precious Jeep and caused Brittany severe emotional distress. It was lie after lie, a mountain of nonsense built on a foundation of pure spite. I felt a wave of dizziness wash over me. This was real. This wasn't just a nasty note or a call to the cops. This was the legal system. This was serious. Pam came into the room, saw the look on my face, and immediately knew. It's here, isn't it? She asked quietly. I just handed her the papers. She read through them, her expression hardening with every line. When she was done, she put the papers down on the counter with a quiet thud. She didn't look scared. She looked furious. Okay, she said, her voice like ice. She wants a war. She's got one. That night, we barely slept. We just sat at the kitchen table, the lawsuit lying between us like some venomous snake. The $25,000 felt like a crushing weight. We weren't rich people. A hit like that would be devastating. It would mean wiping out our savings, the money we'd been putting away for Lily's college fund, the nest egg we'd been carefully building for our future. It was exactly what Karen wanted. She wasn't just trying to win. She was trying to break us. What do we do, Pam? I asked, the fight draining out of me, replaced by a cold dread. Do we just pay it? Our insurance might cover some of it. Pam reached across the table and took my hand. Her hand was warm, steady. No, she said, looking me straight in the eye. We don't. We never ever give in to a bully. Hank, that's not who we are. She stood up and walked over to the filing cabinet in the corner of the room. She pulled out a folder and brought it back to the table. It was the folder where we'd put all our evidence, the permits, the photos, the video. This isn't about money, she said, tapping the folder. This is about right and wrong. She's lying, and we have the proof. The next morning, Pam was on the phone before I'd even had my first cup of coffee. She'd gotten a recommendation from a friend for a lawyer, a guy named Ben Carter, who specialized in property disputes, and as our friend put it, ate HOAs for breakfast. My kind of dinner. We got an appointment for that afternoon. Walking into that lawyer's office felt surreal. It was all polished wood and leather-bound books, a world away from my garage full of tools and engine parts. Ben Carter was a surprise. He wasn't some slick, fast-talking guy in a $1,000 suit. He was a man about my age with a friendly face, a firm handshake, and sleeves rolled up to his elbows like he was ready to get to work. We laid it all out for him. The history with Karen, the construction of the wall, the crash, the lawsuit. We handed him our folder of evidence. He spent the next hour going through it page by page, his expression growing more and more grim. He watched the security camera footage on his laptop, then watched Pam's video of Karen's live stream. When he was done, he leaned back in his chair and looked at us. Well, he said, a slow smile spreading across his face. This is one of the most ridiculous baseless lawsuits I've ever seen. And trust me, I've seen a lot. A huge wave of relief washed over me. So, we can fight it, I asked. Ben laughed. Fight it? Mr. Gregory, we're not just going to fight it. We're going to dismantle it. We're going to make Karen Tillman regret the day she ever heard your name. He then explained the plan. We would file a response denying all their claims, and then we would file for what's called summary judgment, arguing that their case was so weak it shouldn't even go to trial. And on top of that, we would countersue for the cost of repairing my wall and for our legal fees. It was time to stop playing defense. It was time to go on the attack. We left his office feeling like a 10-ton weight had been lifted off our shoulders. The dread was gone, replaced by a new feeling, determination. The fight was on, but Karen had her own moves to make, and her next one was aimed right at our home. The first order of business with Ben was to officially assemble our fortress of facts. He called it the discovery phase. But for me, it was just Tuesday. It was gathering up all the proof that I'd already collected because I knew deep down that a day like this was coming. Pam, a wizard with spreadsheets and digital files, created what she called the Karen Tillman War Room, which was really just a shared folder on our cloud drive. But the name made me feel better. We uploaded everything. First, the official documents. The original building permit from the city of Augusta, stamped and approved. The inspection card with its two beautiful green past stickers, one for the foundation and one for the final structure, both signed by Dave, the city inspector. I even had the original architectural drawings I'd submitted, showing every dimension, every material, all perfectly compliant with city code and HOA by. We scanned them all in high resolution. Each document was a brick in our own wall, a wall of pure, undeniable truth. Next came the photographic evidence. I had taken dozens of pictures during the construction. Photos of the trenches for the foundation, clearly showing they were below the frost line. Pictures of the rebar grid before the concrete was poured. Close-ups of the weep holes I'd installed for proper drainage. It was a step-by-step visual diary, proving that this wall wasn't just to code. It was over-engineered. I built it to last. I built it to protect my family. Then Pam added her contribution, the sightline photos. The day after we got the lawsuit, she'd gone out with a camera and a tripod. She meticulously documented the view from the end of Karen's driveway. She took photos from the driver's seat of our own car, parked exactly where Brittany would have been. The pictures were crystal clear. My 3FT high wall didn't block the view of the road at all. You could see cars coming from a quarter-mile away in either direction. Their central claim that my wall was a hazardous obstruction was a complete and total fabrication, and we had the pictures to prove it. The crown jewel of our evidence collection, though, was the video. We had two crucial pieces of footage. The first was from my own security camera, a little dome camera mounted under the eaves of the garage. It covered the whole front yard and the street. I spent a whole evening going over the footage frame by frame, enlarging the critical seconds before the crash. And there it was. It was grainy, but it was undeniable. You could see Brittany's Jeep pull up to the end of her driveway. You see a clean stop, then brake lights off, instant throttle, the tires spit gravel. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a case of a blocked view. She had stomped on the gas pedal instead of the brake. She panicked and floored it. The camera captured the whole thing. The lurch, the short, terrifying journey across the street, and the final brutal impact with my wall. The video didn't just weaken their case, it vaporized it. The second piece of video was Pam's recording of Karen's unhinged live stream moments after the crash. Ben Carter loved this one. "It's gold, Hank," he'd said, watching it for the 5th time. "It shows her state of mind. It establishes malice. She wasn't concerned for her daughter or for you. Her first and only instinct was to attack you, to create a false narrative on the spot." We had Karen in her own shrill voice, declaring my wall illegal and dangerous, all while the evidence of her own daughter's terrible driving was still smoking in my front yard. It was a masterclass in deflection and blame shifting, and we had it all on tape. With our evidence folder bulging, Ben filed our official response to the lawsuit. It was a thing of beauty. For every one of their false allegations, we had a counterpunch, a piece of hard evidence that proved they were lying. We attached copies of the permits, the inspection reports, and stills from the security camera footage. It was an open and shut case. We thought naively that this would be the end of it, that any sane person faced with this mountain of proof would drop the lawsuit and quietly retreat. But we weren't dealing with a sane person. We were dealing with Karen Tillman, and she wasn't just going to retreat, she was going to double down. Her first move was to use her favorite weapon, the HOA. A few days after our lawyer filed our response, we got another official-looking letter. This one wasn't from a law firm. It was from the Architectural Control Committee of the Oak Meadows Homeowners Association. It was a formal notice of violation. It claimed my temporary plywood patch on the wall was an unapproved modification and an eyesore. It gave me 7 days to remove it and restore the wall to its original approved state, the very wall her daughter had just demolished. The fine for non-compliance, $100 per day. It was so petty, so absurd, that I actually laughed. She's fining us for the damage her own kid caused, I said to Pam, shaking my head in disbelief. This is harassment, Pam said, her jaw tight, pure and simple. She immediately forwarded a scan of the letter to Ben Ho, who fired back a cease and desist letter, so sharp it probably gave Karen paper cuts. But we knew this was just the beginning. Karen had lost the legal high ground, so now she was going to drag us down into the mud with her. Her next move was even more audacious, and it involved a surprise visitor who showed up at our front door. The war wasn't just in the courtroom anymore. She was bringing it right to our doorstep. The knock on the door came on a Tuesday morning. I was in the middle of wrestling with a stubborn bolt on an old generator, my hands covered in grease when the doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on a rag and went to answer it, expecting a package delivery. Instead, I found a man standing on my porch. He was short and stout with a clipboard in one hand and an air of self-importance that seemed way too big for his body. He wore a cheap polo shirt with a crudely embroidered logo that read Community Standards, Inspector. He cited code 12GIV. City said that code isn't real. I'd never seen him before in my life. Hank Gregory? He asked, not making eye contact. His eyes already scanning my property, looking for flaws. Yeah, that's me. Can I help you? I said, my internal alarm bells already starting to ring. I'm here to conduct a follow-up inspection on your unapproved frontal barrier, he said, tapping his clipboard with a pen. Unapproved frontal barrier, I repeated, my voice flat. You mean the brick wall your boss's daughter drove through? He flushed slightly. I'm an independent contractor. Sir, I'm just here to enforce the community bylaws. Now, if you'll allow me access to the property. I held up a hand, stopping him before he could take a step. Whoa, hold on a minute, pal. First off, you're not setting foot on my property without a warrant or my express permission, and you don't have my permission. Second, community standards, Inspector. I've lived here for 10 years. I've never heard of such a thing. Who do you work for? He puffed out his chest. I am retained by the Oak Meadows Homeowners Association to ensure compliance with all community regulations. This reeks of Karen. It was a classic power play, an attempt to intimidate me with a fake badge and a clipboard. Let me see some ID, I said, crossing my arms. He fumbled in his wallet and produced a laminated card that looked like he'd printed it at home. The name on it was George P. Wexler. The title was the same as the one on his shirt. And which bylaw am I supposedly in violation of? George? I asked, leaning against the doorframe. He flipped through the papers on his clipboard, a look of concentration on his face. According to Section 4, Paragraph B, Subsection 12 of the Covenants, all permanent structures must be maintained in a state of good repair. Your barrier is clearly not. This was beyond ridiculous. I felt that familiar heat rising in my chest, but I remembered Pam's words. Don't engage, document. So, let me get this straight, I said, my voice dangerously calm. Karen Tillman's daughter smashes my wall to pieces, and now Karen Tillman has sent you here to find me because my wall is smashed to pieces. George Wexler started to look uncomfortable. I'm just here to do my job. Sir, the violation is the state of the wall, not the cause. I see, I said, and I'm telling you to do your job off my property. You can send me your little report in the mail. Have a nice day, George. I started to close the door, but he stuck his foot in the way. It was a weak, hesitant move, but it was enough. My temper snapped. I didn't yell, I didn't threaten. I just lowered my voice. George, I said, looking him dead in the eye, you have exactly 2 seconds to get your foot out of my doorway before I introduce it to the concept of torque. He must have seen something in my eyes because he yanked his foot back like he'd touched a hot stove. He stammered something about filing a report for non-cooperation and scurried off my porch, nearly tripping over his own feet as he hustled back to his beat-up sedan. I closed the door and leaned against it, my heart pounding. Pam came around the corner. Who was that? Karen's new pet project, I said, explaining the encounter. Pam's eyes narrowed. She immediately got on her laptop. George P. Wexler, Community Standards Inspector. She typed into the search bar. Nothing. Let's try the City Business Registry. Nothing. State Licensing Board for Inspectors. Again, nothing. This guy didn't exist, at least not in any official capacity. He was just some guy Karen had hired to dress up and harass us. It was a pathetic, transparent attempt to create a paper trail of official violations that she could use against us in court. It was fraud, plain and simple. We sent all the details, including George's name and a description of his car, to our lawyer. Ben was livid. He said this was witness tampering and intimidation, and he would be filing a motion for sanctions against Karen and her lawyer immediately. But the encounter left me rattled. Karen wasn't just fighting us with paperwork anymore. She was sending people to our house. It felt like an invasion. It felt like the conflict was escalating, getting uglier and more personal. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that guy on my porch, about how easily he'd tried to push his way into our lives. I thought about the security camera on the garage. It had caught the crash, but it was a wide-angle lens. It was good for the big picture, but it wouldn't catch the small details. The sneaky stuff. Karen was getting bolder. I needed to get smarter. I went out to the garage, the familiar scent of oil and metal calming my nerves. I started rummaging through my spare parts bins. I found an old busted security camera, the kind with the blinking red light. It hadn't worked in years, but it still looked the part. Then I found a junction box, some wiring, and a handful of screws. An idea was starting to form in my head. A nasty, beautiful Hank Gregory kind of idea. If Karen wanted to play dirty, if she wanted to send her little minions to snoop around my property, then I was going to be ready for them. I was going to set a trap. I was going to build a decoy, something obvious for them to focus on. And while they were busy with the fake, my real cameras would be watching their every move. The game had changed. Karen thought she was being clever, but she was just giving me more rope. And I was more than happy to let her have it right before I pulled it tight. The plan was simple, but I knew it would work. People like Karen and the people she hires, they're arrogant. They think they're smarter than everyone else, especially a guy like me who gets his hands dirty for a living. That arrogance is a weakness. My decoy was designed to exploit it. I took the old dead security camera and mounted it inside a weatherproof junction box. I made sure the little red light had fresh batteries so it would blink convincingly. Then I ran a thick black wire from the box, making it look like a professional installation. I didn't hide it. I did the opposite. I mounted the whole contraption on a post right near the broken section of the wall in plain sight. It screamed, "I'm watching you." It was a big, dumb, obvious trap, and I was counting on Karen's people to be big, dumb, and obvious enough to fall for it. The real genius of the plan, however, was hidden. I took one of my smaller high-definition trail cameras, the kind hunters use, and camouflaged it. I tucked it deep inside a thick evergreen bush that had a perfect, unobstructed view of the decoy camera and the entire front of the house. It was motion-activated, silent, and recorded crystal-clear video day or night. If arrogance were bait, I'd just chummed the water. Pam thought I was a little crazy, but she saw the logic in it. "Just be careful, Hank," she warned. "Don't get yourself into trouble. Trouble is already at our front door." "Pam," I told her, "I'm just making sure we get a good picture of it when it shows up." We didn't have to wait long. 3 nights later, around 11 p.m., my phone buzzed with a notification from the trail cam. Motion detected. My heart started to pound. I pulled up the live feed on my phone. The screen was dark, illuminated only by the faint glow of a streetlight. But then, a figure entered the frame. It was a kid, a teenager, probably 16 or 17. He was wearing a dark hoodie and a baseball cap, trying to be stealthy, but he moved with the awkwardness of someone who wasn't used to skulking around in the dark. He walked right up to the decoy camera, just as I had predicted. He looked around, then pulled a pair of wire cutters from his pocket. He reached up and started snipping at the thick black wire I had so obviously run from the box. He was so focused on disabling the fake camera, he had no idea his every move was being recorded in perfect 1080p, from the bushes less than 20 feet away. He cut the main wire. Then, for good measure, he started prying at the junction box itself, trying to loosen it from the post. I watched for a few minutes, my anger mixing with a strange sense of satisfaction. I had him cold. I saved the video file, sent a copy to Pam's phone, and then I made my move. I didn't call the cops. Not yet. This was personal. I walked out my front door, flipping on the porch light as I went. The sudden flood of light made the kid freeze like a deer in the headlights. He looked up, his face pale with panic, the wire cutters still in his hand. "Looking for something?" I asked, my voice calm and low. He dropped the cutters and started to back away. I wasn't doing anything," he stammered. "Really?" I said, holding up my phone so he could see the screen. "Because this video seems to tell a different story." I played back the last 30 seconds. His face went from pale to ghostly white. He was caught. There was no way out. "Who sent you?" I asked. He just shook his head, looking terrified. "Look, kid," I said, taking a step closer, "we can do this one of 2 ways. You can talk to me right now, or you can talk to the police officer who's going to be watching this exact same video in about 5 minutes. Your call." Tears started to well up in his eyes. He was just a kid and way over his head. "Please don't call the cops," he begged. "I'll get in so much trouble." "You're already in trouble," I told him. "Vandalism. Trespassing on private property. This is serious. Now, for the last time, who sent you?" He finally broke. "It was Karen," he mumbled, his voice barely a whisper. "Karen Tillman." My blood ran cold. I had suspected it, but hearing it confirmed was something else entirely. "She paid you?" I asked. He nodded. $50. She said you were harassing her and her daughter. She said that camera was illegal and that I'd be doing a good thing by taking it down. She told me to just loosen the wires, make it look like it was faulty. It was all there. Coercion, vandalism, using a minor to commit a crime. Karen hadn't just crossed a line, she'd pole vaulted over it. I looked at the kid who was now openly crying. He was scared and he'd been manipulated by a master. "What's your name?" I asked. He told me. I recognized the last name. His parents lived a few streets over. "All right," I said, making a decision. "Here's what's going to happen. You and I are going to go have a talk with your parents right now, and you are going to tell them exactly what you told me." The kid nodded miserably. We walked over to his house. His parents were horrified. They were good people who had no idea their son was out committing crimes for $50. There was a lot of crying, a lot of apologies. I told them I wouldn't press charges on one condition. Their son had to write a full signed confession detailing exactly what Karen had told him to do and why. They agreed immediately. An hour later, I walked home with a 2-page handwritten statement signed by the kid and witnessed by his parents. It was another piece of proof. Solid gold. Maine's one-party consent law covered my recording. Mercy covered the rest. I had proof that Karen wasn't just a liar. She was actively trying to sabotage my case and destroy evidence, even if it was fake evidence. She had no idea that her sneaky little plan had just backfired in the most spectacular way possible. The trap had been sprung, and Karen Tillman's perfect manicured world was about to get a whole lot messier. With the kid's signed confession in our hands, it felt like we had Karen dead to rights. Ben Carter, our lawyer, was ecstatic. He said it was the kind of evidence you dream about. Clear, malicious, and totally damning. He immediately filed it with the court as part of a motion to dismiss their case entirely. We were sure this would be the final blow, but Karen was like one of those trick birthday candles. Every time you think you've blown her out, she sputters back to life with a new, more obnoxious flame. Her next move came in the form of a witness affidavit filed with the court. It was from our neighbor Finley, who lived 2 houses down. Finley was a quiet guy, a retiree who spent most of his days tending his rose bushes. We'd always been on friendly terms, barring a cup of sugar, waving as we passed. I never would have pegged him as one of Karen's cronies, but there it was, in black and white, a signed statement under penalty of perjury, claiming he had witnessed me performing shoddy and unsafe work on the wall during its construction. He claimed he saw me cutting corners and heard me bragging about using cheap, substandard materials. It was a complete fabrication, a character assassination designed to undermine all the physical evidence we had. I was stunned. "Finley," I said to Pam, holding the affidavit. "Why would Finley lie like this?" Pam looked grim. "Because Karen got to him. She either bullied him or bribed him. Finley's a widower on a fixed income. It wouldn't take much." The thought of Karen preying on a lonely old man made my blood boil. This was a new low, even for her. We had to fight it. But how do you fight a sworn statement? It was his word against mine. Ben told us not to worry. "People who are coached to lie are never as convincing as they think they are," he said. "They memorize a script, but they don't know the story. We just need to get him off script." His plan was for me to go talk to Finley, not to confront him or accuse him, but to have a friendly, neighborly chat, and Pam would be nearby, her phone's audio recorder running. Maine allows one-party consent. I was that party. It felt sneaky, but as Pam pointed out, it's not illegal to record a conversation you're a part of in Maine. And at this point, we needed to protect ourselves. The next afternoon, I saw Finley out in his yard, trimming his prize-winning roses. I took a deep breath and walked over, trying to look as casual as possible. Pam was on our porch, seemingly reading a book, but I knew her phone was already recording. "Hey Finley," I said, leaning on the fence that separated our yards. "Roses are looking great this year." He jumped, startled. He hadn't seen me coming. He looked nervous, avoiding my eyes. "Oh, thanks, Hank. Just trying to keep them healthy." "Yeah, I know how that is," I said. "It takes a lot of work to build something, right? Make sure it lasts." I was laying it on a little thick, but I wanted to see his reaction. He just grunted in response, focusing intently on a single rose petal. I decided to go for it. "Listen, Finley, I got a copy of that statement you filed for Karen's lawsuit. I have to admit, I was pretty surprised to see it." He finally looked at me, his face a mixture of guilt and fear. "Well, Hank, I had to tell the truth. What I saw, right, I said, nodding slowly. "I just wanted to clear up a few details for my own records. In your statement, you said you saw me using cheap materials. You remember what day that was? Was it a weekday, a weekend?" He started to stammer. "It was a Tuesday, I think." "Yes, a Tuesday in May. A Tuesday," I repeated. "Got it. And you said you heard me bragging about it. Was I talking to anyone in particular?" He was sweating now. "You were on the phone, yes. That's it. You were on the phone talking loudly." It was a terrible lie, and he was a terrible liar. I never take personal calls when I'm working on a project that requires concentration, like mix and mortar. Pam had the phone records to prove it, but I didn't need that. I had his own words. Then Pam made a brilliant move. She had been listening to the whole exchange through her earbuds. She walked over, holding her phone. "Oh, Hank, sorry to interrupt," she said, her voice sweet as pie. "I was just listening back to this audio from the day of the crash. It's so loud, I wonder if you can hear anything." "Finley." She played the recording from her phone. It was the footage from our security camera, the audio enhanced. You could clearly hear the screech of tires, the horrible crunch of the impact. And then another voice, a man's voice, shouting from off camera. "Whoa, did you see that?" She came flying out of their dot, never even looked. Finley's face went white. He knew that voice. It was his dot in the chaos of the crash. He'd been in his yard and had shouted the first thing he thought, the unscripted, uncoached truth. He had seen the whole thing, and his immediate reaction was to blame Brittany, not my wall. We had recorded his real spontaneous statement on the day of the incident. Pam stopped the recording. Roses don't lie, and neither do hot mics. Funny, isn't it? She said, her eyes boring into him. How your story seems to have changed. Finley looked like he was going to be sick. He just stood there speechless, his garden shears hanging limply in his hand. He knew he was caught. We had him on audio in his own voice, contradicting the sworn statement he had just filed with the court. Perjury. I have to go, he mumbled and practically ran inside his house. We didn't need to say another word. We had it all on tape, his coached, stumbling lies, in his own voice telling the truth. We sent the new audio file to Ben. Game, set, and match. He wrote back a few minutes later. Karen's star witness had just become our best piece of evidence against her. She was running out of pawns to play, but we soon discovered she had one more card up her sleeve. A nasty little secret about the day of the crash that was about to blow the whole case wide open. The case was turning into a cascade of lies, and we were knocking them down one by one. First, the fake inspector, then the vandal, now the coached witness. Each time Karen tried to build a false wall, we'd knock a hole right through it with the truth. But we still felt like there was a missing piece. Why did Brittany Tillman, a 17-year-old with a brand new Jeep, panic and stomp on the gas pedal? It seemed like more than just a simple driving error. The answer came from an unexpected source. Our own daughter, Lily. She was in middle school, and like all kids her age, she was plugged into the local teenage gossip network, a web of text messages and social media posts that move faster than the speed of light. One evening, she came to us looking troubled. Dad, she said, some of my friends are talking about Brittany Tillman, about the day she crashed the car. Pam and I exchanged a look. What are they saying, sweetie? Pam asked gently. They said she was at a party the night before, Lily said. A party at her house, and there was drinking. My blood went cold. Underage drinking. If Brittany had been drinking the night before, she could have still been impaired the next morning. It would explain her poor judgment, her panicked reaction. It would change everything. Do your friends have any proof of this? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Lily hesitated, then pulled out her phone. Someone sent me a screenshot, she said, her voice low. It's from a group chat Brittany is in. She showed us the phone. The screenshot was of a text message exchange between Brittany and one of her friends. It was timestamped the morning of the crash, about an hour before she plowed through my wall. Brittany's friend had texted, "Oh my God, are you okay? I heard about your Jeep." Brittany's reply was chilling. "Ugh, I'm fine. Totally not my fault. My mom says we can just blame the neighbors." Stoopy wall. I shouldn't have had so much wine last night. My head is pounding. There it was. A direct admission. She had been drinking wine the night before. And even more damning, it was proof of a conspiracy. The idea to blame the wall wasn't a panicked reaction at the scene. It was a premeditated strategy cooked up by Karen and her daughter to cover up the truth. This wasn't just a frivolous lawsuit anymore. This was fraud. Pam took a screenshot of the screenshot, her hands moving quickly. "This is it, Hank," she whispered, her eyes wide. "This is the motive. They're not just trying to get money from us. They're trying to hide the fact that Brittany was driving while potentially still under the influence. A DUI charge would ruin her perfect record, maybe even affect her college applications. This lawsuit is a smokescreen." We immediately sent the image to Ben. The phone rang less than a minute later. It was him. "Do you have any idea what you've just found?" he said, his voice electric with excitement. "This blows their entire case out of the water. It proves intent to deceive. It's the final nail in the coffin." He explained that with this new evidence, he could file for an immediate dismissal of the case and seek severe sanctions against Karen and her lawyer for filing a fraudulent claim. The court does not take kindly to being used to cover up potential crimes. The next few days were a blur of legal activity. Ben filed the new evidence with the court. Karen's lawyer, who had probably been kept in the dark about the drinking, filed a frantic motion to have the text messages deemed inadmissible. A hearing was set that it felt like we were finally approaching the endgame. The sheer nerve of it all was what got to me. Karen was so obsessed with maintaining her family's perfect image that she was willing to destroy ours to do it. She would rather bankrupt us with a fraudulent lawsuit than face the consequences of her own daughter's reckless behavior. She wasn't just a bully, she was a coward, and she had taught her daughter to be one, too. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sit still. I paced the living room, a ball of nervous energy. We had all this evidence, the permits, the videos, the confession, the audio recording, the text messages. It felt like an airtight case. But I'd seen enough in my life to know that sometimes the truth isn't enough. Sometimes a good liar can beat a mountain of facts. Pam put a hand on my shoulder. "It's going to be okay, Hank," she said. "We have the truth on our side, and we have a better lawyer." I looked at her, my partner, my rock through this whole nightmare. She hadn't wavered once. She had been the calm in my storm, the strategist to my soldier. I know, I said. I just hate that it came to this. I just wanted to build a wall to keep our daughter safe. You did, she said, her voice soft but firm. And now we're building another one, a different kind of wall, a wall of proof. And tomorrow, in that courtroom, Karen Tillman is going to run right into it. Her words calmed me. She was right. We had done the work. We had laid the foundation brick by brick. In our case, just like my wall, was built to last. We just needed one more thing to seal the deal, and it was about to arrive from the one person we never expected to see again. The morning of the court hearing was gray and overcast, a perfect match for my mood. We were headed for a showdown, and even though we had a mountain of evidence, I still felt a knot of anxiety in my stomach. As we were about to leave for the courthouse, our doorbell rang. I opened it to find a young man in a brown delivery driver's uniform standing on our porch. He looked familiar, but I couldn't quite place him. Mr. Gregory, he asked. Yeah, my name's Mike. I'm a delivery driver. I was here on the day of the accident. I saw the whole thing. My jaw dropped. He was the driver of the brown truck that had been coming down the street in my security footage. The one that had passed by just seconds before the crash. I didn't know if it would help, he continued, looking a little nervous. But my truck has a dash cam. It records everything. When I heard about the lawsuit, people in the neighborhood are talking. I thought you should have this. He handed me a small USB flash drive. It shows the whole thing clear as day. I got to get back to my route, but good luck. And with that, he turned and walked back to his truck, leaving me standing on the porch, holding a tiny piece of plastic that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I yelled for Pam. We ran to the laptop and plugged it in. The video file popped up. We clicked play. The quality was incredible, far better than my grainy security camera. It was a wide-angle high-definition view from the perspective of the delivery truck as it drove down our street. You could see everything. You could see Finley in his yard. You could see my house, my wall, and you could see the end of Karen's driveway. As the truck approached, the silver Jeep was clearly visible, stopped at the end of the drive. The dashcam footage showed without any doubt that the driver's view of the road was completely unobstructed. My wall was Then, as the delivery truck passed the driveway, the camera caught the driver's face for a split second. It was Brittany Tillman, and she wasn't looking left or right for traffic. She was looking down at her phone. The truck passed, and the camera continued to record. In the rear view, you could see the Jeep lurch forward violently. Not a gentle roll, but a full-blown tire-squealing launch. It shot across the street and slammed into my wall. The video captured the impact, the cloud of brick dust, everything. It was the final irrefutable piece of the puzzle. She wasn't just impaired, she was distracted. She was texting. We called Ben immediately and told him what we had. He told us to get to the courthouse as fast as we could. We walked into the courtroom just as things were getting started. It was a small, formal room. Karen and Brittany were sitting at a table with their lawyer, looking smug and confident. Karen was dressed in a sharp power suit, the picture of aggrieved motherhood. Brittany was trying to look like a traumatized victim. They both glanced at us as we sat down, a flicker of contempt in their eyes. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with sharp eyes and a weary expression, called the proceedings to order. Karen's lawyer stood up and launched into a dramatic opening statement, painting me as a reckless monster and my wall as a public menace. He presented their case, which consisted of Brittany's tearful testimony and Finley's now useless affidavit. Brittany claimed she'd pulled up to the end of her driveway, but the illegally high wall blocked her view. She said she'd inched forward to see, and her car had just lurched out of control. It played well until the facts rolled in. Then it was Ben's turn. He stood up, calm and collected. Your Honor, he began, the plaintiff's entire case is based on a series of demonstrably false claims, and we have the evidence to prove it. He started brick by brick building our case for the judge. He presented the building permits and inspection reports. He showed the sightline photos, proving the wall didn't block the view. He played the audio of my conversation with Finley, followed by the security camera audio of Finley himself, yelling that Brittany had come flying out of there. Finley, who was in the courtroom, turned a shade of purple I'd never seen before. Then Ben moved on to the kid who had vandalized my decoy camera. He submitted the kid's signed confession. Karen's lawyer leaped to his feet, objecting, but the judge waved him down, her eyes fixed on the document. She was starting to look angry. The courtroom was silent. Karen's smug expression had vanished, replaced by a look of growing panic. Ben then submitted the screenshot of the text messages. Your Honor, this is a message from the plaintiff, Brittany Tillman, sent on the morning of the crash. In it, she not only admits to drinking wine the night before, but she also confirms a plan with her mother to blame the neighbor's stupid wall. The judge read the text. Her expression turned to stone. She looked over at Karen and Brittany, a look of utter disgust on her face. And finally, Your Honor, Ben said, his voice ringing with confidence, we have one last piece of evidence. It came into our possession just this morning. He walked over to the court's television monitor and inserted the USB drive. This is dashcam footage from a delivery truck that was passing by at the moment of the incident. He hit play. The The courtroom watched in stunned silence as the whole event unfolded in crystal clear high definition. The unobstructed view, Brittany looking down at her phone, the violent, uncontrolled acceleration, the crash, it was undeniable. It was the truth, raw and unfiltered. When the video ended, the silence in the room was absolute. The judge slowly took off her glasses and rubbed her eyes. She looked at Karen's lawyer. "Do you have anything to say in response to this?" she asked, her voice dangerously quiet. The lawyer, looking pale and shaken, just stammered, "No, Your Honor." The judge turned her gaze on Karen and Brittany. "This is one of the most flagrant, malicious, and fraudulent cases I have ever seen in my courtroom," she said, her voice rising with every word. "You have wasted this court's time. You have slandered an innocent man. You have attempted to use the legal system to cover up your own daughter's dangerous and reckless behavior. I am dismissing this case with prejudice, which means you can never file it again." She wasn't done. She pointed her gavel at them. "Furthermore, I am ordering you to pay for all of Mr. Gregory's legal fees and the full cost of repairing his property, and I am referring this entire matter to the district attorney's office for potential charges of perjury, filing a false police report, and insurance fraud." Karen let out a little squeak. Brittany burst into tears. The gavel came down with a thunderous crack. Case dismissed. It was over. We had won. We had not just defended ourselves, we had triumphed. The truth, backed by hard evidence, had smashed their wall of lies to dust. Walking out of that courthouse felt like stepping from a long tunnel into clean daylight. The weight that had sat on my chest for months, gone. Pam squeezed my hand. We stood on the steps, breathing, letting the noise of the city wash past. The legal fight was over. Peace of mind still needed work. A few weeks later, a check landed. Karen's insurer covered Ben's fees and the wall repair. Per the judge's referral, the DA opened a file. Charges followed. Word spread fast. Karen's reign as HOA queen ended in one loud thud. At the next meeting, she was voted out in a landslide. Turns out, people don't love bullies who use bylaws like brass knuckles. That's when I made my move. I hate bullies, but I love fixing things. Our street felt cracked down the middle. So, I ran for the HOA board, and I won. First order of business. A simple safety rule. If bushes, fences, or hardscapes block your view, you install a convex driveway mirror. Cheap, sensible, prevents Jeep meets brick sequels. It passed without a peep. With the insurance money, I rebuilt stronger mortars, more rebar, flat stone caps you could eat lunch on. Neighbors I barely knew showed up with lemonade, shovels, and awkward apologies. We laid brick and let the anger bleed out into the work. The new wall didn't just look good, it felt like a promise kept. Then came the final touch. Petty, legal, perfect. The new rule applies to anyone with an obscured view. Guess whose fancy hedges count, right? Karen Tillman. As a board member, I delivered the notice myself along with the best, brightest safety mirror I could find. 30 days to install, I said, smiling. The look on her face could have curdled paint. She knew there was no fight left in it. I had used her favorite weapon, process against her by the book. A week later, the mirror went up, big, clean, and angled per my helpful diagram for maximum safety. It gives a clear view of traffic. It also gives a crystal reflection of my place, the rebuilt wall, the tidy yard, the home that didn't break. Now, every time Karen backs out, she has to look straight at the truth she tried to bend out after that. The street got quiet in the best way. Kids rode bikes again. Finley waved first. The HOA agenda shrank to potlucks and potholes. Pam and I sat on the porch with coffee and watched light slide along the new stone cap. The wall did what it was built to do, protect. The case did what it needed to do, prove. People ask how we won. We didn't shout, we stacked proof. We set boundaries. We let the loud talk themselves into a corner. Being the noisiest person on the block doesn't make you right. Evidence does. My name is Hank Gregory. I fix things. Engines, pipes, messes people make. This time, it was a street, a family, a boundary line. One brick, one form, one very well-placed mirror at a time.